The title of this talk is Overcoming the Challenges of Reaching the Bedside, and I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Jane Sosabowski about it. So,
Hi Maggie, I'm Jane Sosabowski and I work at Barts Cancer Institute, and I'm a reader in molecular imaging, but I have interest in radionuclide therapy as well, and I work mainly in preclinical, but I also work in translating radio tracers into the clinic.
Okay, and I'm Dr. Maggie Cooper, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in the School of Biomedical Engineering and Imaging Sciences at King's College London. And my main role is to try to translate projects from the laboratory into a clinical setting. And I have about 25 years experience in radiopharmacy. So together we're going to talk about some of the challenges really of getting products to the bedside and beyond, in fact, onto the market. So, Jane, what would you say were some of the main strengths we have in this field?
So, I think in the strengths, when you're looking at radiopharmaceutical development, we've got really good innovative track record, and we need that. There needs to be somebody doing this innovation and kind of developmental work in order to take it to a clinician and enthuse him about it and say, listen, we've got this really great new tracer. It would work in your patients, it would make things better for your patients. And the clinician has really got to be, invested in it and to think, yeah, you're right, it's going to be, really good for my patients. So unless you have that, you have a clinician that's really interested, I think that and I'm talking here about, the oncologist,
Yeah, so we've got well, on the one hand, we've got scientists who can really develop new diagnostic and therapeutic agents, but we've also need to have on board the clinician who we excite about that project.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little bit of a benefit and a challenge. But if you get somebody on board, then the project can really move forward.
Yeah, I think if you involve them at like grant funding stage, then that is really key, to involve them in the actual scientific process. But also, you also need nuclear medicine consultants who really want to do research, because unless you have that in your nuclear medicine department, whatever you're developing isn't going to go anywhere locally.
Would you say that it needs to be broader than that? Sometimes on grant applications it really helps if you have some sort of collaboration or something like that. How do you feel about that?
What do you mean with other academics, or do you mean?
Yeah, well, maybe with other academics, other NHS units or whatever.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, the thing is about the NHS is that all the departments are completely overstretched. They don't have the capacity. Normally, they're very involved in the routine. So unless you have kind of a way in to your local radiopharmacy or a radiopharmacy somewhere with radiopharmacists who are engaged and have the will and the capacity to do it, then you also are really struggling to get anything new going, any new clinical trials going anyway. It's a lot of work.
So it might be, on the one hand, having people within your own site who are able to help get your project off the ground, but also if you have links to other hospitals or other departments to get projects working. Absolutely.
I mean, if an idea comes from Europe and they can't get it into the clinic in Europe, why not put it in the clinic in the UK? Or for instance, they might not have the patient. I can think of a project where somebody's got a really good agent, but they don't have a patient population in their hospital. So that's when it could go somewhere else. So then it's really important to have these kind of academic collaborations, across countries and, across the UK. So we can work together and say, okay, you've developed something really great, but actually you don't have the infrastructure within your local site to be able to put it into the clinic. So let's try and see how we can do it somewhere else.
And within, say, we talked about that a little bit there about the teamwork and the fact that you need, say, you need your nuclear medicine consultants, you need your physicists, you need your pharmacists and stuff like that. Maybe there's a situation where one unit has that as a strength and can really help another unit to develop that further.
Yeah, I mean that would be ideal, but I think that if you have a unit that is really engaged in doing clinical trials, they're going to be completely overrun.
Right.
So it's very difficult to get, your idea into a clinical trial at another site because they've got their own priorities. They've got all their academics with all their ideas.
So capacity then may be a challenge in many respects. It may be a challenge in terms of having enough staff who are experienced in this field, and also having capacity within the working day to do certain projects. I know for ourselves we would say that's the situation with gallium, is that it's difficult for us to get clinical trials with gallium because the generators are being used for so many patient studies, and there isn't room to incorporate the trials. I mean, we do a great job, and our radiopharmacy is fantastic, but there's still, that is an issue. Capacity is an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, we say, oh, we'll just do a clinical trial on this, but actually slotting a clinical trial into the busy routine is almost impossible.
Yes, and I think that Vicky has covered that to some extent and explained some of the issues that radiopharmacy face with that. But it's not just the radiopharmacy; it's the whole of the nuclear medicine department that faces that.
Yeah, because
that
there may be camera capacity. You know, if you think of for instance, if it's a PET radiotracer, then you've got your gallium products, your fluorine products. Then you may also have rubidium, which has come over from SPECT. So you've got, your camera capacity is really stretched at the moment. So,
can we talk a little bit about some of the costs that are involved in translating projects? Because I feel that is one big hurdle to get over. What sort of costs are involved?
I think that, well, first of all, you need to, get some really good preclinical data. That's not even the most expensive thing. I mean, getting really good preclinical data is something that academics are pretty good at getting funding for. It's really that, as soon as you need to start buying GMP material, you need to start doing stability testing on that, you need to start doing toxicity testing on it, then you're starting to talk hundreds of thousands of pounds. And you cannot do that unless you have got some, say, UKRI funding or Cancer Research UK funding, or perhaps a company interested in it. That's the only way you'll be able to do that.
I think that cost of GMP starting materials is really crucial because, for example, we had one study where we just needed a buffer made, simple buffer, and it was ridiculous. It was more expensive than all the scans, all the scanning time. So we had to then switch to a different buffer that we could just buy off the shelf. But sometimes it's not possible to do that, and if you need your main radiopharmaceutical to be made to GMP, then that's a huge cost. And it may, as you say, it may be in the tens of thousands if you're lucky, but it's more likely to be 100,000 or more than that.
And now, of course, on top of that, there's the stability data and the documentation required for the IMPD. And the company can produce all of that, but it costs a lot of money as well.
Yeah, and toxicology testing is also, toxicity testing is expensive.
Well, you probably have more experience than me in that.
Well, I just know that it's expensive, but I don't know. But it's a huge additional cost that needs to be considered.
I think also, though, you can talk to the MHRA about it and see whether you can do kind of a limited toxicity.
For the diagnostic agents, it depends what you're doing. If you have a clinical trial that you need the investigational medicinal product for, then you are going to have to do some limited toxicology testing, and they have simplified it, so there is that benefit. But if you're doing a clinical study yourself, then you take the burden of responsibility. And so if you have done it, your in vivo analysis, in mice or something like that, then normally the dose that you will have given to those mice will be far in excess of the dose or equivalent that's going to a patient. So they'll say that is satisfactory for a clinical study. So you might find that one of the things that can be done is that you can do maybe a small-scale clinical study and to establish human data, first-in-man data, and then that can be used for your IMP in a phase 1 study.
And then saying, we don't need to do the toxicity testing
because it's already been in man.
So then you have to persuade your university or your hospital to sponsor that trial and to take the risk, I guess.
Yes, you do take that burden of responsibility.
So I think also, the thing about, the barriers we're talking about, the regulatory burden, I think, we all know that it's intensive, but I think sometimes it's even a psychological barrier.
I definitely think it's a psychological barrier. Every time I think about regulations, I start to worry. And it is a lot of work to do.
Yes.
But I think actually sometimes we think of the MHRA as somebody that you can't talk to, but their clinical trials helpline, for example, are really quite helpful.
Yeah.
I've had some very good communication with them.
Yeah.
But we if you really want to have a proper conversation with them and to get real answers, sometimes you have to have a proper scientific meeting with them.
Yeah, so then you would be paying something like £5,000. You take all the questions that you wanted to know the answers to for your clinical trial, prepare very well, and ask them all of those. I think they look at it in advance, and then you actually go for a meeting there, and then they will give you the answers, and you can have a bit of a discussion with them. But you do need to pay for that, because they need to evaluate it, properly, and to give advice that is basically you can rely on. They're not going to turn around and say, oh no, you can't do that. They will have it on record that they have advised you that you can do it in a certain way.
And when we go back to the funding issue, what are some of the ways that people can consider raising funds in order to do a clinical study or a clinical trial?
So for a clinical study or a phase 1, you could be looking at UKRI or you could be looking at charity funding, that type of thing. But I really think as soon as you're getting to phase 2 and phase 3, I don't think that academia has the funding to do that, and I think that you really need to get a company interested in your agent if you want to take that forward.
So if you're able to put in a patent for your new radiopharmaceutical, then securing a commercial manufacturer or getting somebody else on board, commercial company on board, is quite key.
Oh yeah, I mean, unless you've got a patent, a company will not take a risk. So they won't say, we're going to put millions and millions of pounds into this agent if we know somebody else was just going to be able to come along and copy it. So, there are instances where that has happened, but it's been mainly things that have been orphan drugs, those types of indications where they've got marketing authorization for it.
Can we just talk a little bit about the commissioning of services once we might have something that's gone through a clinical trial, but still it doesn't really reach the market for one reason or another. And part of that challenge is people like NICE, for example, or just the commissioning within the NHS. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Well, I think commissioning is quite a murky topic, and you're never quite sure what the commissioners are thinking. And of course you're not the only ones who are trying to say, yes, you should commission a particular radiopharmaceutical. If it's not commissioned, it's very difficult to get reimbursement for it unless they make a special case about it. And then that can kill your radiopharmacy production. If they suddenly say, oh no, you should be using something else, and you say, hang on a bit, we've just spent however many months setting up a gallium-68 production, and now you're saying we need to use a fluorine-18 agent that we know is worse than the one we're trying to use.
And there's some need to prove clinical outcomes and stuff like that, and that might be difficult if you've got a diagnostic tracer compared with a therapeutic agent.
Yes, because aren't they classified as some type of specialty agent? So therefore it's some special classification whereby the diagnostic agent needs to meet the same standard as a therapeutic agent, for instance, in order to be commissioned, and that makes it incredibly difficult.
So we've seen there are many challenges. I think that the key things I would take home from this is, if you've got a project, get a clinician on board, get somebody who excites somebody.
That's the starting point.
That's the main thing, because once you've done that can drive the whole project forward.
Yeah.
Get a good team behind you, the radiopharmacy team, physicists, nuclear medicine consultants, nurses, technologists, whatever, a clinical fellow, whatever you need. Build yourself a good team. If you've got that good team in place, you can achieve so much together.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I would also say that if you can't, if you're really in a local situation where you find that you're being blocked at every turn, why not get in touch with people like Incita, for instance, and start talking to people around the country and see whether there's enough support. Within the community to actually get a really good agent into the clinic.
So I think that would probably be our best take-home message: is talk to each other. Let's
Yeah,
talk to each
as
other
a community,
as a
we need to talk to
community,
each other,
and then we together we can achieve so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.